Hi there, Andy here. Welcome back to the podcast. In this episode, I'm talking with Alex Stanton. He's an illustrator going by the name of Wou-Wou and the Wormling. Me and Alex talk about his profession, alongside gaming and hobbies, AI art, jobs, music, creativity in all aspects really, and much more. Be sure to check out the links in the description pointing to Alex's pages. But anyway, if you're ready, let's go.
So I don't have to.
So when did you start drawing then? Like, how long have you been doing it for?
I think I came out of the womb pretty much with a pencil and paper.
Really?
Yeah, for as long as I can remember. So it used to be that, you know, if me and my parents went out anywhere, you know, like for a meal, they'd always bring a sketchbook, paper.
Really? Okay.
And pen, sorry.
Yeah.
And and it just kept me quiet, and it just never really seemed to end.
Yeah.
And so my mum, she does watercolor. She's relatively artistic.
Yeah. So there is a bit of that in the family. Yeah. It comes from somewhere then. Yeah.
So yeah, I think it mainly comes from that. And my dad played guitar and bass.
Right. Okay.
Dribs and drabs. I mean, he used to work a lot, so he never really got a chance to do it. But there was always a guitar, so creativity's always sort of been in the air.
Right. Okay.
And drawing was just the easiest way to sort of step into that.
Yeah. So you just started naturally in a way, and it just continued.
Yeah.
That's cool. I used to draw loads when I was younger, but I kind of stopped doing it. But I did enjoy it. But if I draw now, I'm like as good as I was when I was sort of 10.
Right.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But like, it's
a shame. I think that's quite common. So I think most kids draw.
Yeah.
But then for whatever reason, they just
I'd stop at some point.
Yeah, I mean the education system when I was in it, never really catered for that. It was all very academic based. Even then, in the 90s.
Yeah, it's just not. They don't push you towards that at all, do they? Because it's just not. They don't see it as like viable or going to get them. Like they want you to go to unis and stuff, don't you, as well? So
I mean, they're not wrong.
No.
I don't exactly make loads of money or anything, but
that's it.
That's
one of the things I was going to say to you. Really, like, how is it? Do you live off it yourself, or
so since October? Yes.
Really?
And it's been relatively good until this month, where it sort of dried off a bit. Yeah. But there's a couple of things in the pipeline, potentially.
Yeah.
But there's always that thought in the back of my head, like, what the hell am I doing? This isn't really sustainable. Yeah. But so far it has been.
It's pretty impressive to be able to get to that point, though. I suppose you just had to do it for so many years to get to that point, but now that you are there, it's kind of...
I mean, I've been doing the odd bit of commission work since 2015-ish.
Really? Yeah.
Mainly album covers or track art for people on SoundCloud or Bandcamp.
I saw that, I saw that online,
Yeah. And that's where it kind of begun. And I didn't really make any money. It was usually like a trade. I'll do you a bit of artwork if you do
it's
some
kind of like handshake stuff,
me.
isn't it? Yeah.
But then the odd thing would come up where it was, can you draw my pet or something? So it would slowly trickle, and then I'd get the odd ad job, which is basically like storyboard work for pictures. As in like they're pitching something
like an idea. So they come to you with an idea and you try and create that.
Yeah,
as an image, basically.
Yeah, I mean, it'd only be like a brief of 5 things.
Yeah.
Like woman holding phone or something like that. It was never very exciting, but...
Do you enjoy doing that stuff, or do you find it a bit like you'd rather just do your own thing? So I was listening to one of your things today, and you said, if I could just draw for 8 hours a day, I would.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I see it all as practice.
Yeah.
I don't necessarily enjoy it, but I think what makes me not enjoy it is the time pressure. I always sort of feel like I'm on the clock with those sort of jobs, especially when it's a company. If it's a private commission, most people are pretty happy for me to take my time on it.
If it's a proper company, they've got deadlines and
exactly,
stuff.
And they usually pay a little bit better. So in that sense, it's nice, but I'd sooner be doing something a bit more relaxed, let's say. And a little bit less corporate, you know, but it is what it is. You know?
It is what it is, yeah. It is what it is. And I think, you know, it's something like this that you're doing is like, it's quite a long game sort of thing, isn't it? Like, you've got to be in it for a long time. It's a lot of music and art and stuff. Like, people are like that, aren't they?
Definitely, yeah.
You've got to stick there and be there still doing it. Like 10 years later, you know, instead of stopping doing it. Like we were just saying about SoundCloud, like loads of folks did music on there, but not many sort of carried on doing music. And and it's a shame because, you know, you can get better at things and you do learn things, you pick things up along the way. And I think it's always exciting to see where someone started and where they are 5, 10, 20 years later. Well, they kind of transition from one thing to another. Did you, were you kind of like, when back in the day, like 10 years ago, were you more music focused then?
Definitely, so I've always drawn, but there was a period around, I guess when I was about 15, 16, when I started playing guitar, that I was definitely more focused on learning music, not necessarily like the theory and stuff, although I did eventually try and teach myself that sort of stuff. But just making music, making sound. I got a little 4-track cassette recorder,
like a Porter Studio thing.
I mean, even back then they were outdated. But it's all I could afford at the time.
I've got one like that. So it was more a love for recording music than actually sort of performing it. I have done that, but me too.
And it was fun, but I sort of like arranging sounds. I like playing around with, you know, not necessarily the production.
You want to just get
stuff.
I've always said, like, for me, like, I want to get a sound. I just want to get something down so I can manipulate it. And then mess with it and do stuff. And then add something next to it, and it's that's the fun thing about it, isn't it? I think.
It's that randomness almost. Like, you don't know what's around a corner, and it's a little bit like that with drawing for me as well. But so I was very music focused up until 2014. And then I started drawing again because I realised music takes a little while to do, or it does for me, and I want to post a little bit more regular and do my own artwork for
something that's a bit more instant.
And so I picked up a sketchbook and thought, I'll try and get a little bit better. Because I never stopped, but I never tried. And then I got a little bit addicted to that. So my social media sort of became like, there was music on SoundCloud, but everything else was sort of art related or drawing related.
So it kind of became separate.
It did, I mean, the whole sort of like Wou-Wou and the Wormling name was meant to sort of be like a band name, I suppose. I was eventually going to try and find other people to do things with. And then it's kind of stuck. Like, I should really use my own name for my artwork, but
well, you got both, haven't you? Really? Like, I think it works. I think it's fine. It's. I think the name's kind of like the Foo Fighters is a shit name, isn't it? And they're not the best band in the world.
No,
it's like I always think that's quite a bad name, but it doesn't seem to matter.
No, and I suppose that's what they. That's what they're known as, and that's kind of what I'm. Not that I'm as big as they are.
I recognise your name, because it's different to a lot of names. It's a bit longer than most names, and I think when I see it, I go, oh yeah, I know who that is. It's and your style is like very recognisable as well, isn't it? So
people say that.
Definitely,
which is
I think
nice.
So. It's like a mixture between like abstract and realistic, isn't it? I would say, like
sometimes, I mean, I'm. It's nice that you've said that. Because
I think especially
I do
people, the people you draw. Like, obviously, the other thing that's interesting that I noted down, like the study things that you do. Do you find that to be like a really important part of your process? Like,
yeah,
to like force yourself to do things that you wouldn't normally do?
I mean, there's quite a lot of it's quite nice as well, you know. I mean,
yeah.
So it was about 2 years ago, maybe 3 years ago. So I was still making music, but I actually damaged my hearing.
Really?
And I thought, well, I can't do that as much anymore, and I've not really picked it up since. Although I still play around every now and again.
Yeah.
So I decided to focus solely on the drawing for a couple of years, and I thought there's lots of things I don't know. There's all these fundamentals, perspective, anatomy, blah blah blah. So that's when the study properly started, because up until that point I hadn't really drawn much from references. It was all imaginative stuff.
Yeah.
So yeah, it took a little bit of adjusting to, and I tend to go the long route with a lot of things. I find,
yeah,
because you know, when it comes to drawing like a face or a person, there's a lot of construction lines that you're meant to do. You know, there's gesture drawing, or you know, you map out the shapes or whatever. But I don't tend to do that. I tend to just eyeball it. Yeah. But that's what interests me more in a way. It keeps me more entertained.
Yeah,
and
to not know what's happening.
Yeah, sort of. I mean, I suppose it's like manipulating sound in that sense.
Yeah.
You know, it's what's around the corner. How's this going to end? Like, is it going to end terribly?
Not having a definite idea. Yeah. Yeah, I'm the same. Yeah. It's more. It seems to me more like mystical and like. I don't know. It's kind of just like more. It's just more fun.
Yeah,
like,
definitely.
When you know exactly what you're gonna. It's like, all right, I've underpinned all of this now. I'm just going to fill in the blanks. It's a bit more like, okay, I know what I'm doing now. It's kind of like join the dots.
Yeah.
But yeah, I heard you saying that at one point in one of your videos. Like, is it called underdrawing then? Is that what that is?
Yeah, you call it underdrawing.
Yeah.
I mean, people call it all sorts of stuff.
Yeah.
Because I don't really do it, I don't really know what the proper term is.
Well, it's a different style, isn't it? And I think I like people who, I like musicians, for example, when I was growing up, like who did that kind of thing, who were like off the wall.
Yeah.
And, I remember I found out about Aphex Twin through John Frusciante.
Oh,
because he was. I think he was at like some awards thing right before he left the Chili Peppers in the second time.
Yeah,
and he was like, "Oh, my favorite music, Aphex Twin," and I was like, "What's that? Like, that sounds mad. Like, it doesn't sound like." I didn't expect him to say it, and then I went on a rabbit hole of like all that stuff. Yeah. But I just love how their attitudes towards music is like, I just find my way.
Yeah,
every time I go in the studio.
Yeah,
and like the thing about like Cyro, the album, like he made that in like 7 different studios. He said that he'd set.
Oh right, you say I don't know much about that
around his house.
Yeah,
but like,
right, yeah, of course.
But like he said
nice.
that he'd done it over 10 years in like 7 different setups, and it's just like that's cool. I like the fact that he's like very freeform with it.
Yeah, I think it's how it's sort of meant to be, and I think you can tell. Yeah, there's that sort of devil may care attitude. It sort of seeps into things. You can see it. There's an energy to it.
Yeah, definitely.
I've always enjoyed improv in any form, like be it music or you know, comedians or whatever. I think because there's that, you know, edge of your seat sort of nature to it. It does add to things. I think if there's something's too practiced, it can lose that. It loses a bit of life.
Yeah, definitely. How fast do you fill a sketchbook?
It depends on the week, but I can fill a sketchbook in a week.
Really? And that's how many pages do you have in them? Like,
well, I tend to use Muji sketchbooks, which aren't huge. They're B5, which is a little bit bigger than A5.
Yeah, in between A5 and A4.
For the paper nerds out there. But so that might take me a week, 2 weeks. It depends. Yeah. I mean, these days, it's especially now I've not got a lot of work on. Yeah. You know, I can fill one in a week quite easily, or a couple of days, because if I'm really hyper focused on something, like the time just melts away. Like you don't really realise. But sometimes it can be months, like, or if I'm doing a lot more digital stuff. I'm not really touching, you know.
That's colour things in as well.
Sometimes, yeah. I mean, a lot of the commission work I do tends to be digital just because it's so much quicker.
Yeah.
And you've got that, you know, Command Alt Delete or whatever it is, you know, you can just.
It's much quicker, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. And I'd love to do everything more traditionally, but it's just not time effective. It's not. If you're on the clock.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, if you're busy and you've got loads to do, and that's how it is. I mean, I use Photoshop and stuff a lot at work, and I design stuff as well on CAD, and it's just like we used to do stuff at work by hand, and it's just like it's so fun to do stuff by hand, but also it's just time consuming.
If you have to redo it, you know about it, don't you?
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. That's it, and it's no fun really.
Yeah.
I think there's good sides in both though. Like all technology is interesting in some way, isn't it?
Oh, I'm very thankful for doing digital work as well. I mean, it helps a lot, even with practice. So I'm trying to learn or better understand anatomy. I've got like a baseline idea of anatomy, but I'm really trying to sort of figure out how things move properly, all the muscles. And for doing quick sketches, especially if you've drawn like a shoulder girdle, it's a lot easier to do that in Photoshop and add the muscles to it on another layer than it is to sort of redraw
the whole thing
in a sketchbook. And and also animation. Like I do very rudimentary animations, and I don't really share them, but it's just to understand things. It's not necessarily to
see how
animation.
Things move and how they look when they move. Like
the whole sort of like foreshortening and all of that sort of.
Do you find like what is the hardest things to draw? Is it people?
People are tricky. Especially when it comes to the human body in general, because there's so many points of articulation. There's so many. You know, it's not just the bones, but it's the muscles that move, and some of them are tense and some of them are loose, and you know, there's a slight tilt of the head, a slight, you know, tilt of the wrist. What's the hand doing?
Yeah, I remember you saying some of your things like, oh, this person's like got the neck back like that, and you said it was like quite challenging for you to draw that because it's an unusual pose, I suppose. Yeah,
I mean, it's anything that you're not used to seeing, because everyone's got a degree of a visual language library. Sorry.
Yeah.
You know, most people see people from like sort of eye level, let's say, head on, or you know, to the side or whatever, but they don't necessarily see the top of their head very often, or like
a 3/4 from the back. Or
exactly.
Like, it's not common. Yeah.
And it's not, if you imagine a face, it's not typically the face that you imagine. It's like these unusual sort of positions.
So you don't find it the hardest thing to draw? What I think you said, I think one of your things was like cars, wasn't it? You said you didn't.
Cars, yeah. I mean, the more I learn, the more I practice just basic shapes, the more everything seems a little bit easier. And I get people asking me, you know, how do you simplify things, or how do you draw that, or whatever? And I just practice shapes.
Practice all types of shapes to be able to see it.
Start with a cube or a plane, you know, or just a square that moves in 3D space. Start with that. Learn a little bit about perspective, and I don't know all the theory, but just a little knowledge goes a long way.
I know what you mean. Yeah, I've experienced the same thing with designing stuff, because what I'll do a lot is like we make stuff for motorcycles at where I work, and basically like I'll scan the bike and then put the scan data and work on that. And now I'm at the point now where I've kind of got this. It's not a taught understanding. It's a bit like yourself, but it's like this understanding that you just know it.
Yeah,
it's hard. It's like you say, you can't explain one specific one specific use case of it. You have to just sort of build it up.
Yeah, it becomes an instinctual thing, really.
Yeah.
Because I don't know how to do the grids necessarily that people do. Like there's lots of art teachers out there.
Yeah.
And you know, I've watched the odd video or whatever trying to better my understanding, but I just find it easier to just draw something a lot, and then when it starts to look right, then I'll try and understand it a little bit more instead of boring myself with all this information that I probably won't really use. So
finding out for yourself, sort of thing.
Yeah. So it becomes an instinctual thing.
So how many cats you got? You got 3 cats here?
I've got 3 cats.
Yeah. What's the names of all your cats?
So the eldest, the tuxedo, is he's called Bootsy.
Yeah.
After Bootsy Collins from Funkadelic.
Is he a funky cat? Yeah.
No, he's an absolute pain in the bottom. But,
he likes getting the bass out.
I love him, but you know.
Yeah.
Yeah. He's just he's a pain.
Yeah.
I mean, he's mellowed out because he's about 13 now. As a kitten, he'd be biting wires and he'd be in all the things he wasn't meant to be in and whinging all night. And
it's funny for a bit.
It's funny if you're not living with him.
Yeah.
Then there's Mouse,
Yeah.
who's the little black cat.
Yeah.
Who is like the most loving,
chilled out, isn't she?
Yeah, she's just the most incredible little thing. I love her to death. I love them all to death. But and then there's Binny, who was that sort of rescue cat, the one that was found in the engine of my partner's car.
Yeah.
And put things on forums, see like, does anyone know who this
cat is?
Yeah, does anyone own this kitten? But nothing ever came back. So
they're so cool, aren't they? I've always had cats in my family, but it's just like I've had a couple of dogs as well on my dad's side, but like they're awesome to have about, aren't they?
Oh, I mean, I was always more under the impression that I was more of a dog person, and I don't know why. My mum's more of a dog person, and we sort of had dogs when I was growing up, but I don't really remember them. Yeah. And my dad's always preferred dogs, so it was always dog. And cats were rubbish because they'd poo in the garden and stuff. My mum was a gardener, so so you know, they were like the devil or something.
They're so different though, aren't they? They are so different.
They're such characters though, and it wasn't until I actually started living with them that I adore cats now. I mean, I adore all things. Animal nature, really, but they're real characters, and I'm surprised how different they all are.
It's amazing, isn't it?
Yeah,
it is amazing that, because I've just got this cat that I've just bought, and it's like she was at a cattery, so it's a place where they just look after people's cats. But my mum found out I wanted a cat, and she got like stuck straight into it. And she was like, "Oh, I'll find you one." So she went and found this guy, and she said, "Oh, have you got a cat at this place?" And he was like, "Actually, yeah, we have. We've got a little cat that's just sort of hanging about." So we ended up getting her, and but yeah, it's mad because my mum's cats, when we first got them, were really timid and like scared. This little cat Bella is just like, she's 6 months old and she's just like all over the house already.
Bold.
Wants to see everything, you know. And even now, she's had an operation yesterday and she's like got a little cone on now, but she's already like wanting to get out of her.
Oh yeah,
it's crazy. Like, but yeah, they are so different. They are so different, aren't they? And it is amazing, really. It's like you wouldn't imagine they'd have such deep personalities, but they do, don't they? Like,
no, it's really surprising. I feel like more so than dogs in a way, but again, I've never really owned a dog. I do love dogs, you know. But especially because cats don't really have much expression in their face, if any. It's just sort of like that vacant, well, not vacant, but you know, that death stare.
It's either closed eyes or open eyes. And
a little whingy mouth every now and again. But in their behaviour, you know, it's especially in terms of like, say, drawing or animation or thinking about things in terms of character, like they're brilliant for that sort of things because of their movement and just, you know, their little actions.
It's cool, isn't it? Yeah. What kind of synthesizers and stuff did you used to use when you made music? Did you have a lot of hardware or did you use a lot of digital? Like,
so I went into a little bit of a rabbit hole, and I bought things that I still own, but I've maybe used once or twice. Yeah. Like a Chaos pad.
Yeah, I have one of them.
Which was great, and I used to take it to work every now and again. And I've got a Korg Prophecy, which is a monophonic bass lead sort of thing. But I can't play keyboards, so it was pointless. I could do the MIDI thing, but it's too many wires, and so I've got a few other things like that. A few guitar pedals that I really like, but typically yeah, it's digital.
Yeah.
And I tend to just use stock things. I don't.
Yeah.
I find more enjoyment in finding the sounds
And trying to use them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Especially when it comes to, I like limits when it comes to creativity.
Yeah.
And a lot of the music I do it fits into certain amount of limits. I've got a few different projects that sort of.
What kind of limits do you give yourself? And like, can you think of an example? Like,
well, so when I first started the whole Wou-Wou thing, I was meant to be sort of documenting and experimenting with creative limits. That was kind of the thing. I was going to potentially do like a YouTube thing, and I just got very lazy, and it just became like a drawing thing.
Yeah.
But it was going to service both sides of my creative.
Yeah.
Output. Thank you.
Yeah.
So the first one was going to be chance. So using dice and coin flips and pulling things out of a hat to give me prompts in order to create music with.
Yeah.
And I came up with lots of different things. One of them was more sort of theme based. So it was, make something pretty, make something ugly.
Yeah.
And then I moved on to something that was, I'd pick the chords, the time signature, those sort of things out at random.
Yeah.
That became the Buskers Bamboozle. I gave them all really stupid names.
Yeah.
I think that's what it is anyway. It's been a long time since I did it.
Yeah.
And I picked out like 50 different tracks that way.
Yeah.
And I've still got some of the stuff. It became so much work for me because I always overshoot things. I started getting other people involved. And I feel really bad because I never really finished that. It's still like even though I started it in 2014, it's something I never really finished.
Yeah.
And I've got like 30 tracks with like collaborations on it.
Yeah.
And I have started picking it back up again.
Yeah.
Now my ears are a little bit.
Just finishing them off later on.
Yeah.
Kind of cool though. Kind of cool because I think it's nice. Like the one thing, like I used to produce loads of music on my own, and also with my friend Joe. And but now looking back on all of it, it's like, see, I never had like an idea like that really. I used to just kind of just make stuff, just save it.
Yeah.
I used to mix it down to like an MP3 and then just delete the Ableton file straight off.
Right.
And then it's like I can't even worry about that now.
Oh, that's such a good thing to do though.
And now it's just a little thing in time.
Yeah.
But like it's nice to have them like future, like you listen to them again in the future and you think, oh yeah, that was quite cool.
Yeah,
like,
I mean,
get a different perspective like over time, don't you?
Yeah.
Sounds like Brian Eno.
Yeah, well, it would. I mean, the brief time that I spent at our college, we did actually do the oblique strategies. I think it's called.
Yeah.
So I took that. It's one of the few things I took away from art college because I was never really there. To be honest, I skived constantly.
Yeah.
But yeah, so that was the launching off thing, and then.
Hello.
And I'd also do it with drawing. So the cats actually picked out prompts for me as well, and I'd try and draw things in those sort of prompts.
Yeah.
And then I've got another side project called the Audio Bin, where I'd ask other people on SoundCloud and Bandcamp for their offcuts, for the things they didn't use, the takes that they didn't use. Demos.
I remember that.
Yeah.
I think that's what that's what we did at some point. Yeah.
And again, I've got another album worth of that needs fettling with. But that was, I think, out of everything, that's always been my sort of favourite thing because it took some of the pressure off, and there was a lot of exploring. Like I'd get all these little treasures. Other people's there's a saying, isn't there? Someone else's waste is or whatever it is. But
I'll find it and I'll pop it into the
thank you.
I'll pop it in. I'll get like Google to say it or something.
That'd be great.
One man's junk is another man's treasure.
But yeah, it was like that. It was, you know, like a little Christmas gift or something every time. And I get like, a drum thing. It's like, oh, well, I can try and trying to use that as many ways as I could, because I only had like one beat to make 12 tracks with. So it becomes sort of more interesting to me in a sense of, you know, because I do make music without these limits, but I always kind of prefer the stuff I do with limits.
You think you make better stuff when you've got the limits,
sort of,
or you make stuff that you enjoy more? Like,
maybe it's because I'm sort of disassociated from it a little bit, because I don't judge it as harshly as maybe some of the stuff I've done without those things.
Making your own sounds, making everything yourself.
Yeah.
I know what you mean. When something like appears like that from someone else, and you didn't find it yourself, really.
Yeah.
You asked for it, but you didn't find it yourself.
Yeah.
It's like it's like a free thing.
Oh yeah.
It's weird, isn't it? I know exactly what you mean. It's like I remember I was remember once I like put, you know, before Tet, he has that.
Oh yeah.
He has that Spotify playlist, which is massive of just other people's stuff. I remember I would just like set my computer to record, and then I would just flick through tracks and just resample for like an hour.
Yeah.
And then I would just grab that and put it in Ableton and then just throw it together randomly.
Yeah.
And it's really fun because I didn't even know where I got it from, really, because I can't remember all those things I heard.
Yeah.
And it's
a lovely way to work. It's almost like collage.
Yeah.
You know, like the visual version of that would be collage potentially.
Yeah.
Or photo bombing or whatever it's called, photo merge.
I know exactly what you mean. Yeah.
And I love anything like that, really.
I think I have to tell a lie, really, because I recently did try that. I moved to a flat with my girlfriend, and I'm not there anymore, but I couldn't really set all my music stuff up like I used to have it, because I used to have quite a few synthesizers and stuff. And then I thought, what I'll do is I'll just try something different. I'll literally just use the computer. And what I was doing was I was sampling from stuff. And my limitation was that all I could use was like, do they call it like clip mode in Ableton? Where like it's all you can do is play a loop.
Right, okay,
so you pick a sound.
I think I know what you mean, yeah.
And also the other it was another Brian Eno thing where he picks loops that are varying lengths, and you get an endless piece of music.
Yeah.
And I was trying that. Obviously, once you bring a beat in, it's quite hard, but like you have to kind of lock it down. But it was fun to like just say, that's all I'm going to do. I'm going to just put those clips together and see what I can create. And like you say, like when you said collage, and like you get this kind of, it's nice because it creates itself a little bit.
It does, yeah. I mean,
technology is amazing, isn't it? It's just crazy what you can do on a computer.
I mean, I like the idea of how people like Brian, you know, used to do those things as well, you know, like with tape and actually cutting the tape, you know, that seems very romantic, but I imagine it was an absolute pain.
Yeah.
You know, it's so simple now.
Yeah.
But that limitless potential can also damage it a little bit as well. I think it
kind of damages your I don't know. Obviously, everyone's different, aren't they? But I feel the same. When you've got endless possibilities, it kind of just becomes a little bit boring, doesn't it?
I mean, I think deleting, like what you do, you know, the project, I think that's a very good thing to do, really. I found it liberating. Yeah. Because I used to stress that, like, I need to go back to that and improve it. Yeah.
That's a question I had for you, really. Like, how do you know when, like, for example, with your drawing, like, how do you know when you've done one?
Well,
how do you know when you finished it? Did you try and do that, or you try and finish it there and then, or?
Well, I mean, I sort of feel like there's nothing I really do is ever finished, which is silly, because once it's on the page, it's there. But I don't feel like I do finished work.
Yeah.
And whenever I've tried to do something finished that I've had in my head, it never kind of comes out quite right, because again, you've got that expectation. And I don't really know. I'm so prioritized with just moving on to the next thing. I think everything is a work in progress, but sometimes I'll look back at something and think, oh well, that seems done.
yeah
But Yeah, I'm sort of like my harshest critic in a lot of ways.
It's annoying, isn't it? It is annoying, that feeling. You do need it, I suppose, at the same time. But like, I think that's the other thing that I reference Brian Eno all the time, to be fair. But one of the other things he said was that, like, I think it was in an interview with, I think he was speaking to Adam Buxton.
Oh right, yeah.
And I think he was saying,
to that, actually.
yeah, it's good. You probably have listened to it. And he was like, yeah, I can't tell when anything's good now.
Yeah.
Like, he says he just saves it and then comes back to it like 2 years later. He's like, well, bloody hell, which me made that?
yeah.
Yeah, and it's like, yeah, I like that. It's like the freedom of like not having to worry about knowing where it's taking you almost, and letting it happen.
I think most things are better with a bit of distance.
Yeah.
I mean, I find that, so if I'm drawing something from a reference, I'm never necessarily, I'm never aiming to create something perfectly.
No.
But it's nice when that happens.
Yeah.
And if it doesn't happen straight away, it depends on my frame of mind.
Yeah.
But if I'm really wanting to nail something down, recently it was eyes. It was the plane of the face around the eyes.
Yeah.
Because there's a slight curvature and I don't feel like I was ever really doing it. So I was hyper focused on getting this
nailed.
Yeah.
Yeah. You wanted to get it right.
And everything was wrong and everything was rubbish. But now looking back on it a week later with that distance, it's like, well, no, I think that's considering how simple a lot of my lines are, there's nothing else I could do.
Yeah.
Potentially. I mean, you can always better yourself.
Yeah.
But, I looked at it a little bit kinder. You know?
Yeah. After the fact.
Yeah. So I think having that distance with anything, any creative,
outlet. Yeah, definitely. Yeah. No, it's true. It's funny how, it's funny, isn't it? Creativity is a weird one. It's hard to get your head around. There's so many ways of looking at it.
Yeah.
That's what's fun though. I think when you get a new perspective on what you're doing, it like lights something up in you, doesn't it? And makes it more fun again.
Yeah.
What do you think about most? Do you think about future, past, or present?
Well, typically it's the present. I always try and stay present. I like focus again especially with the sketchbook stuff.
Yeah.
I like that focus. I like being
in the flow state.
Moment. Yeah, in the flow state.
Yeah.
But since moving here, so this house is similar in a way to my childhood home.
Yeah.
Not totally, but very similar.
Yeah.
Even in like sort of how the location is as well, not just the layout of the house.
Yeah.
And it's made me very nostalgic.
Really?
Yeah. And I don't know if because now I'm in my 30s and, which isn't old, I know, but, but yeah, there's a bit of, again, distance from that childhood sort of experience.
Yeah.
So I've been revisiting a lot of old games, old movies, old media that I used to sort of.
What old games? What's one of your favourite old games?
I used to really like the Oddworld games.
Right, I've heard of those. Yeah,
Abe's Odyssey and Exodus.
Yeah,
I was never very good at them, but there's something about that world. It's Lord Lanning, I think, the guy who created it, says it's sort of like Muppets, but it's a very twisted version of the Muppets. So,
yeah. Bit of a crossover between something that's supposed to be for children and something that's a bit weird. Yeah,
I mean, because it's humorous, but it's also incredibly dark. And I gravitate towards things like that all the time. And I think that was kind of one of the first things that did that for me. Yeah. I used to love the Final Fantasy games.
Yeah.
Metal Gear Solid.
Yeah. That's a great game, isn't it?
Oh yeah, platformers. Because there was, I remember playing Mega Drive and a bit of SNES. So those sort of 16-bit games I've got.
It's crazy how different it is because like I'm 26.
Yeah.
So I don't think I ever really played any platformers properly.
Right, yeah.
I don't think I did.
They sort of fizzled out.
Yeah. Quite quickly, didn't they? Yeah. Once the PlayStation 1 came around, it was,
that was
all changed, didn't it?
Yeah. It seemed to be more story driven.
Yeah.
Everything was meant to be like a a film-like experience. And you look at them now, and they're like not even close to that.
Yeah.
Especially things like Metal Gear Solid and Final Fantasy were advertised as being movie games almost.
Did you play the original Fallout games then? Because they weren't they like what were they like
isometric? Yeah. So I don't know how I ended up with it, but I think someone at school gave me a copy of the first game.
Yeah.
And I played it for maybe an hour, and I didn't really leave the beginning section because I'd never played anything like that before, and I was only like 12 or something like that. I shouldn't have been playing it really, but now I know more about it.
Yeah.
But I would like to revisit it, but I hear it's an absolute pain to play as well.
I've never played any of those. I've actually only ever played 4, and people say 4 isn't really the best one. But
no, I mean, everyone's opinion on the best one is very... I enjoyed 4, but I have more fond memories of 3 and New Vegas. Because 3, even though I'd played the first one, 3 was the first one I'd played through. And again, it sort of hit the notes of dark and humorous. So I spent a lot of time in that world. But I enjoyed 4. I did enjoy 4.
I think it's
more so than most
funny.
people.
It is funny. I've played it a lot, to be fair. It is. I mean, I suppose for me it was like more of a new experience. So it was kind of, I wasn't bothered by what people were saying, but the theme is just so good. Like
and they can do anything they want. Really,
Yeah.
You know, and because there's so many different factions and so many creatures and so many ways they could go. I mean, I think that's sort of the problem with 4 in a sense, that they didn't fully explore things like they had maybe in 3. And New Vegas is very nuanced. You can, that game is very much catered to you. But I'm an absolute sucker for anything you can build something in as well. So I put a lot of time into
the building side of it.
Yeah.
Really, I wasn't interested in that.
No,
I was always like, love taking out like settlement, like taking out, going in bases and stuff. I just love that. I love like sneaking in and just like trying to do it as clinically as possible. You know? But like,
you see, I'm rubbish at things like that. I like it, but I never
always get
succeed.
It wrong. I don't get it. I don't get it right very often, but it's good fun, especially on Skyrim as well. I mean, Skyrim's great for that.
It's something I really need to play. I've started it once or twice. And never, I think something else has always taken my attention away. But because I did enjoy Fallout 3, I think Skyrim was the next game on. There's no reason why I wouldn't enjoy it just as much, because it's similar in its way.
It's funny how you just can miss. I mean, the thing is, there's so many things to enjoy in the world.
and those sort of games, they eat a month.
Easily.
Compressed 100 and so hours, easy.
You have to spend so much time on them, don't you? They are good fun though. I've been recently playing it again, and there was an interview with the guy who is it Todd Howard, the guy who like leads those games, and he was talking about it, and it like got me back into it, like how excited he was about like
he seemed quite passionate.
What they're doing in the future, and it's. But it's just the length of time it takes for them to make the games now.
It's insane.
And like you were saying, like I think you were kind of saying, like there's like less features now in games. But the level of detail is just it must take forever. Like to do all that stuff. Like
I do kind of like a bit of jank and a bit of experimentation, but new games are a dream to play. Like, so it's a hard balance, I think.
I know what you mean. It's a big industry now, isn't it? So it's different.
That's the other thing. I mean, I think they've got to make things a little bit easier for people. I know there's the things like Dark Souls and Bloodborne, which I've not really played, that are incredibly hard. But I think most developers sort of focus on something that's a little bit easier, or a little bit more breadcrumbed. So people can actually get through it and experience it, because they're spending so much time on it and money on these things.
You can't make it too hard so people don't see it.
And I think it's kind of nice in a way. I mean, you can see it a bunch of different ways.
Definitely. Definitely 100%. What else have I got here? Who would you say, like, it's hard to answer this, but like I'm not going to say top 3, but like who would you say like are some of your favourite musicians like from the past?
Well,
or current?
Yeah, or they're all quite old and fusty, I think.
Yeah,
at this sort of time. So I think in terms of someone who was always there when I was growing up is Ivor Cutler. I don't know if you know Ivor Cutler.
Not heard the name though.
I think the Beatles kind of made him famous in the 60s, but he's a poet more than he is a musician. But
yeah.
And again, it's that mix between humour and dark. Everything he plays is kind of like a nursery rhyme or for children, but it's really not.
Yeah.
There's like a deep layer of darkness there.
Yeah.
And he's Scottish and he's Jewish.
Yeah.
And he tells all these poetic stories about his childhood, and they're all quite absurd.
Yeah. Do you not never? Are they sometimes you can't really tell if he's like making part of it up? Some of it's true.
I think probably, but maybe the bits that seem the most outrageous are probably true.
Yeah.
I feel.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think Ivor Cutler's sort of stuck with me.
Yeah.
Because my dad was a big fan of him, and there was lots of other things he'd listen to.
You say he's more of a poet then, so he does do music then.
He does, yeah.
But it's like
he plays a harmonium. He plays the piano as well, but it's like an Indian foot organ.
Yeah,
it's sort of like an accordion, but
yeah. I think there's an Aphex Twin song on one of those.
Probably, yeah.
Which one is it? I can't remember which one it is. It's on Druck's album.
Yes,
and it's like it sounds like sound like a what's it called?
I can hear it, but I mean I don't know what any of his tracks are called.
No,
to be honest, because
I can't remember what.
Apart from like some of the bigger ones.
Yeah, I can't remember like what it's called. Yeah. So who else have you got in mind?
So in terms of, I mean, I could list thousands, but in terms of like people who sort of opens my mind a little bit, which seems a bit sort of outrageous to say, but
it's true. Yeah, some of them do, don't they?
Yeah, Thelonious Monk.
Yeah.
The jazz pianist. That was just insane listening to him for the first time. It's like, what? You can do what?
With just a piano.
Yeah. And just like the angular phrasing of everything he does is just, it really...
Off kilter, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Everything's falling down the stairs, almost. And I wasn't overly familiar with jazz, but I'd listened to things like Django Reinhardt, a lot of swing stuff, so I wasn't used to the hard bebop.
Yeah.
And now listening to Mingus and things, like I can hear elements of that angularness in it, but Thelonious Monk was the first. But I could also say Bjork. I could also, in terms of people who open my mind.
I was looking through your like, because obviously when you do your videos, I think it's a reel in it on Instagram.
Yeah.
You put a lot of different. Well, the cool thing is that you put a lot of your own music in there, and it's nice how you can reuse it.
Yeah,
in that way, isn't it? But like, I see that you put so much different stuff on there.
Oh yeah.
And like that's all the stuff you like, I guess. Like all the different stuff you're into.
I mean, I try and pick things that are listenable, I suppose. I mean, I don't really listen to things that are really wild anyway, but
not too out there and crazy. I have to do that with because I put little interludes on this podcast. I always try and pick the ones that are a little bit more like chilled out, you know.
Yeah, I think it's nice. I don't think everyone wants to be sort of assaulted,
blasted in the face.
But and then sort of again with opening my mind to things, Captain Beefheart was another one.
Yeah, I've recently started listening to that actually. Yeah. He's good, isn't he? Yeah.
It's different. I don't think he was a particularly nice man.
No.
But he was out there.
He said some pretty. I listened to some of his lyrics. And I didn't really get what he was saying, but it did sound a bit like. But yeah, it's really like. Sometimes it's just those troubled people that make the cool stuff, don't they?
Yeah. Unfortunately, they sort of push the art form along, which I think he sort of did in a sense.
Yeah.
And then in terms of like the emotive side of music, in fact, John Frusciante, funnily enough, you mentioned him.
Yeah.
His solo stuff.
Yeah.
Like those first couple of albums, so tortured. And I'd never really heard anything like that.
Yeah.
And I'm a sucker for anything that's a bit melancholy.
Yeah, me too.
Or, sort of pushing away the limits. which he sort of did vocally a lot.
Like completely like just not thinking about any kind of vocal range or anything.
No,
just like
and
screaming and shouting and
tortured and but also very heartbreakingly beautiful at the same time. I think
because he's got the songwriter below it, hasn't he? He's got that you can still. It's what I like about John is that you can. All the different like guises that he uses for his music, you can still hear those chord structures beneath.
And
that are very John Frusciante.
And a simplicity to it as well. Again, I like less is more with most things. But also again, Aphex Twin, he keeps coming up things like Rhubarb. Or Number 3, or
whatever it's called.
And PJ Harvey and Tom Waits was a huge inspiration for a little while. Again, people who just sort of make me cry. I'm a big fan of that. But I also like, fun music as well. John Shuttleworth. Do you know John?
I know the name.
The comic. It just lifts my spirits. And then artists like Funkadelic, Sly and the Family Stone. I'm a big fan of soul and funk.
So eclectic.
I just like.
It's like good music.
That's
something.
I like to think so.
Something, It's just it's just something that like turns you onto it, isn't it? There's something about it, and like usually for me, it's something that's like you say, like a little bit off the mark. Not quite what you expect. Like it's always good.
There's that
weirdness.
And it doesn't even have to be like a technical skill necessarily. But they have to be sort of in tune with the emotive side, I think.
You'll always draw.
I imagine so. I mean, the future seems a little bit uncertain sometimes, especially being freelance. And so, there's always the thought in the back of my head, I'll probably have to get a normal job at some point, which is fine. I worked as a care worker for 12 years.
Right.
And best time of my life, really.
Enjoyed it.
I loved the people I looked after, and the staff were all incredible. And it was a real shame to leave that place, but I felt like I had to sort of do the drawing, and actually try, because it'd be a shame. And things had changed at the company I was working at. Management had changed. Everything was sort of getting a bit bleak. And again, it was all kind of upsetting. So for my own mental health, I'd leave. Was
it getting quite stressful towards the end of it then? Did you feel like you needed to change?
Lack of management, lack of direction. People were losing services. People who we were looking after were leaving. Good staff were leaving. And I was one of the oldest members there, because I was there at the very beginning. And I kind of didn't want to see it get worse. But all through that time, I did art. I did something creative.
I was going to say, it seems to me that like you've always been doing it. Like
it's kind of what I do when I've got an hour or two, even 5 minutes. And I imagine if I do have to get a more regular kind of job, if I can't find something that's creative, I'll still do the creative stuff. It's an itch. It has to be scratched. It's therapy. I think as a kid, because it wasn't. I had a very nice childhood, but it wasn't always happy like everyone's is. And, people leave each other, and things happen, and drawing was my way of making sense of the world. And it still is.
Yourself from things and getting your own thing going.
But I mean, yeah, totally. So I don't think I'll ever stop.
Yeah.
And again, it's always exciting to see what's around the corner, and to push myself into doing something that I wouldn't have even dreamed of doing.
Yeah, it's always fun, that, isn't it? It's exciting for that to happen, and when you do it, you feel it gives you a big boost of confidence when you achieve something you didn't think you could do. Yeah,
as long as it goes right.
That's
but then it gives you something to work towards, you know. So.
Definitely, yeah. It's like you said about the path. Right at the start, you said like the path that people take. It's interesting. This is kind of like me doing this is like kind of snuck up on me a little bit.
Yeah.
Like I didn't realise, I just all of a sudden realised that I've been listening to like podcasts and stuff for so long, and I really enjoy listening to them.
Yeah.
And I just all of a sudden clicked. I was like, I could just have a go at that.
Yeah.
And why not? Like it might not go anywhere, but
well, I mean, I really respect it. You know, I'd like to do something similar as well.
Yeah.
And I like what you're doing in terms of talking to lots of different people as well. I think that's interesting, kind of more interesting than something that's hyper focused on one thing.
Yeah, I sort of felt like I didn't want to like talk about something specific.
Yeah.
I want to like it's funny like talking to you now, like there's an element like I've never met you before.
No.
And it's like there's an element of like it's like, oh, I feel a little bit awkward. But like I really enjoy getting to the point where you go past that and it's like, oh, I met that person, and in a few years we might say hello to each other online again, and you know what I mean? Like you meet someone and it's cool, it's different, and it pushes you outside your comfort zone a bit.
Yeah.
I think it's fun.
And I think we all need to learn it. Like nearly everyone's lovely.
Yeah.
And meeting people,
you
know, that you don't know, total strangers. You know, it's all fine.
We all want to just get on, don't we?
Yeah.
Like, we all want to just be nice to each other, really. Most people, I would say. And even people who seem to be like, you know, a bit upset or a bit like angry or something, like, I bet if you could just say the right thing to them, you'd get on their good side. And
you know, there's a pain there or something that needs to be solved.
Yeah.
You know,
exactly. Yeah. 100%. Talking earlier about adding colour to stuff.
Yes.
Do you like doing that, or would you rather just stay in the world of black and white?
So I like to typically do whatever's immediate. Again, it's the idea of improvising.
Yeah.
And taking away some of the fuss. So I suppose when it comes to drawing, that's my limit. Like I won't do under drawings because I want to see what happens with the immediacy of using ink. It's irreversible.
Yeah.
And, you know, when it works, it feels great. And when it doesn't, it gives you something to work towards.
Yeah, and try again, yeah.
Yeah. But with doing colour, because I'm not as devil may care about it, and I probably should be, that's where the perfectionist comes in. And I can spend hours doing very simple colour, because again, I keep things simple. I don't go for painterly, I go for graphic typically.
Yeah.
And I'll spend hours on it on like a drawing that maybe took me 10 minutes, 5 minutes.
So you do a drawing you're particularly like happy with, and then you go, right, I'll put the colour on.
Yeah.
And
then get frustrated.
Yeah, I was going to say, because you've identified that you like it, and then that's when you get to that point, isn't it? Where yeah.
And
but you feel like you have to do it sometimes because
sometimes, I mean, for commission work, there's often the need to do it. But I typically don't dislike, but I don't like my colour stuff as much. And I tend to gravitate towards artists who keep things simple. Or draftsmen, you know, the people who draw. I like the simplicity that they do. There are artists that are very colourful that I love, but I see that more as sort of like a fine art thing. But I am attempting to learn how to use watercolour. And I would love to do some painting. So and that seems a bit more immediate. So I might really take to it.
Might be quite cool to like just show the people that process, like I'm gonna, because like a lot of stuff on YouTube and that is like, this is how you do this, and
And
I think it's fun.
I think, you know, I think, 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 I think
I follow a guy called Atomic Shrimp on YouTube.
Oh yeah, I follow him. Yeah, I love Atomic Shrimp. Yeah.
And I love how he like, he's always learning on the job.
Yeah,
and I love that. And he's got quite a lot of followers because he got a load through COVID, didn't he? But
yeah,
I think there's like a core base of people who love the fact that he just shows what he does.
Yeah,
and gets things wrong. And like, there's one that he did recently where he was trying to like make clay pots or something.
Oh, I think I might have seen one of those because there was a series of things.
But it was funny because he was just like in the third video, it's like, the first 2 videos were like completely wrong.
Yeah,
and I love that. I think it's quite like it's just honesty, isn't it? Like, it's honest with people.
Well, it's human. I mean, I think especially with social media, it's easy to see the impossible made true because there's so many incredibly talented people on there that make things seem so easy, and these things look so perfect in their way. But the interesting thing about them, like you say, it's the human, it's the mistake. And I tend to gravitate towards that more than the perfect watercolor or like the one-to-one perfect portrait of Ian McKellen or whoever. Doesn't interest me as much as something that has some mistakes in it.
And it's got an attitude to it.
Yeah.
It's interesting, isn't it? I think it's social media is a weird one. I mean, I did put that somewhere, like pros and cons of the internet in general, but I suppose I'm talking about social media really. Like, that's it, isn't it? Really, it's kind of it's good and bad. What do you think about it? Like, what's your thoughts?
It's mixed. I mean, I couldn't necessarily do what I'm attempting to do without it. I could. I'm lying, I could.
You could.
And I do send my portfolio out to places and yada, yada, yada.
Yeah.
But there is an element of I've got a little audience now.
Yeah.
Which is, really nice.
Hard to get.
Well, it's took 10 years.
Yeah.
But again, I'm incredibly thankful, and it's not through my own doing. I mean, don't get me wrong. I've watched, these social media gurus.
Yeah.
I've tried a couple of the things. It's like, well, that doesn't work, and they tend to not really know what they're talking about anyway.
Yeah.
Algorithms change. Yeah. Especially with Instagram.
Yeah.
But so yeah, I think it's kind of a hotbed for mental health, like ill mental health, because I've fallen down that trap before. Why isn't this doing very well?
Yeah. Beating yourself up about it, thinking like you think you put something out there that you think's going to go well because you like it, and then people don't see the same thing.
No, or whatever, or the platform of choice just doesn't share it for some reason. Yeah. It's a weird thing, and I don't. Yeah, so I try and take as little stock in it as I can these days.
Just try and make good stuff.
Yeah, well, just do it for myself and do it because it might help someone, because I'm always grateful when people message me and ask for advice. I had a young artist sort of ask me to look at their stuff recently, and I took the time to do some Photoshop notes and say this is what you might want to practice, and I don't see myself as a pro. I don't see myself as knowing everything, but the bit of advice I can give, I'm always happy to give.
Yeah, it's nice, isn't it? Nice to impart knowledge to people. Yeah.
And I think the community side of social media is great. Yeah. I think, having that audience is great. I just don't like how things are dished out sometimes.
Yeah.
And you've got to find your own balance with it. And for me, it's turning notifications off. Typically, it's posting something and not really looking, although I'm getting into bad habits at the minute.
Yeah, I do it as well. Everyone does it, I think. Yeah.
But it seems to be the less sort of interested in it I am, the better it does.
Yeah.
But the harder I work at it, the more I tie myself up in knots and things just don't seem to happen. It's really... I think
it's very tricky to get right, isn't it?
Yeah, I think being relaxed and trying to interact with people.
Yeah.
And like with SoundCloud, I really loved SoundCloud when I was using it most days, because there's a rapport there, and you can get those on any platform.
Yeah. There's a few, like you said, I've got a few people who I still speak to, like they follow me on like a few different platforms, and they like my stuff and I like their stuff, and it's nice to see what they're doing in it. And like you say, you get it's nice to see people that are carried on doing it as well. That's what I think is really cool about yourself, is like it's like you've been doing that for a long time, and I think that's the key really in a lot of ways. There's a guy who does like ambient music as well, who I follow, and he's still doing it, and he's always collaborating with new people. And it's cool. It's nice to see, and they're obviously like very passionate about what they do.
Yeah,
that's what people want to see in it. They want to see people who are passionate about things.
I think so. Yeah. I mean, I've noticed it in terms of, again, I don't really try and put too much emphasis on followers or anything like that, but it was strange when things just sort of shot up. I went from like 1,000 or 2 to 16,000 with one post. But
really?
It was insane, and then it just kept skyrocketing, and then it'll plateau for a bit, and then it'll go up again.
Can find another one again in the future. Right, so that is kind of the system deciding that it likes your thing then? Sort
of. I mean, it's because I was putting so much effort into drawing at the time. I think it's because I was being consistent, and like you say, like people seem to like passionate or passion.
It's stuff they can believe in, isn't it? Genuine. They can see there's a genuine thing behind it, like you were saying earlier. Yeah.
And I think it's easier to sort of do that, find something that you love and put the effort into that, and not worry about social media.
If you love it so much, it doesn't matter. That's going to happen anyway.
Exactly. Yeah.
Definitely.
Instead of doing it the other way around.
It's funny though, because it's hard to like see that for a long time for me myself. Like I felt like it's only how I feel now. But like, because obviously it changes all the time. But at the moment, I feel like I should have been doing this instead of the music.
Right.
Which is weird, because I did love doing the music, but I used to find it quite like at times I would find it quite like a bit of a pain to do. Like, I'm not really enjoying this. And at the moment with this, it's just like it seems really natural. And both my parents are like big talkers.
Yeah, right.
And
it's almost hereditary. Then.
I think it might be. Like I think it's probably a bit of a calling, really.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
But it's nice to try things, isn't it? And I do love music so much.
Yeah, and I think it'll inform you. You won't see it now.
Yeah.
But come to a few years down the line, you might see how it has informed
other things,
like including this podcast, or whatever,
Definitely, yeah, I think so. I've locked my phone. Let me have a quick look. I just think I sometimes don't read through them all enough, and then I miss things that I go back and I go through them, and I'm like, fuck yeah, I asked you that. What's a film or a show or a game that you've like enjoyed recently? Like,
so film. I recently watched Parasite.
Yeah.
In fact, at the beginning of the year, so I've started journaling. Bullet journaling.
Okay.
Or attempting to. I'm not very good at keeping.
What is that called?
It's basically a easier way to journal. So it's not necessarily like having a diary.
Yeah.
It's like bullet points. Bullet journal.
Yeah.
And so I write down what I eat that day. And there's trackers, so if I've drawn, I'll write a little cross, because you have your calendar.
Yeah.
So it's kind of just keeping note of things.
Yeah.
Almost like a diary, but it's a very simplified version, and you'll do a little sort of like to-do list, and you'll do how you felt that day.
It's quite quick to do. Like.
Yeah. So at the beginning of the year, when I was setting that up, I created a list of films that I'd like to see in the year.
Yeah.
Games.
Yeah.
And books I'd like to read.
Yeah.
And Parasite was on there. It was like the first one I sort of got through. Everything, everywhere, all at once.
Is that good?
Yeah.
Is it really good?
Yeah, I really enjoy it. I mean, if you like things like Fight Club and The Matrix, you'll probably
enjoy it.
Really enjoy it.
Yeah, I do like Fight Club. Yeah.
It's it's got like an air of kookiness to it as well, and it's humour, but it also it packs a punch as well emotionally.
Yeah.
And it's just a feast for the eyes.
Yeah.
And Parasite's sort of like the opposite of that. It's just quite a bit depressing and
really
good.
Is it a bit of a like end of the world sort of thing?
No, it's very like class based.
All right.
I mean, I don't want to say too much.
Yeah.
Because I went in not knowing anything about it, so
yeah,
I think that's sort of the best way for that particular film. I think there are films you can kind of spoil to a degree, but that one's quite different. What else have I watched? Oh, I don't know. There's
so much stuff.
Not loads of things, but enough things to sort of forget. Games, I've recently finished all the Uncharted games.
Oh, really? Yeah. Watched someone play that actually recently.
Yeah.
One of the most recent ones, yeah.
I've got mixed feelings about it.
Yeah.
I do enjoy it, or I did enjoy them.
Yeah.
But I don't feel like it packed that emotional punch that maybe I was after from things like The Last of Us or whatever.
Yeah, yeah.
It was it was an action film basically.
Yeah,
you're playing through one of them, and it's very Indiana Jones, and it's.
You watched the new Last of Us TV series?
I've not. No.
Yeah, it's good.
Is it good?
Yeah, it's got a few like. It's obviously it's just it's the story, isn't it? The first game, but like it's got a few like side bits which.
Oh
are cool.
right, okay. I didn't really realise that.
Only a little bit, but yeah.
I kind of wasn't so bothered because I feel like I've played the game, and I've from the trailers and the promo stuff, it sort of looked like they were just replaying but I might give it a go.
It's good. It is interesting. Yeah. It's just exciting to see, like, because it's been a long time since I played the game. I think it's been long enough so that like I could I'd forgotten things about the game.
Yeah.
Things that happen, and like things would pop up, and I'd be like, oh shit, that's about to happen. Forgotten about that.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's cool. It's good. It's well done, and it made me like start playing the second game again.
Yeah.
The part 2 game. So.
Yeah. What did you think of the sequel? Because I feel like I'm one of those weird people that actually kind of prefer it.
But I don't think it's any better or any worse, really.
Yeah, true.
It's It's like I think well played, fair play to them for like going quite ballsy on it and like, just going for it.
Yeah.
Because like sometimes they get a bit sort of attached to things, don't they, when they've done one good series?
Well, that's how I felt about Uncharted. To be honest, it was sort of like the same thing.
Yeah. Again
and again.
Yeah.
It was good, but
I suppose if it's 4 games, it's they usually end up ruining stuff, don't they?
Yeah,
when
and
something's
they
successful.
didn't with that, I don't think.
Yeah.
I enjoyed the last one.
I felt like Peaky Blinders was a good series, and then they just kind of kept going, and I was just like, you need to just stop now, because...
They do it a lot with stuff, though, don't they?
Yeah.
There's only a few that really sort of keep things up.
It's too tempting, isn't it? I suppose.
It is, yeah. I mean, I was never the hugest fan of The Walking Dead, but I remember watching the first season, because I'd read the graphic novel before that came out, so it was kind of...
Yeah.
I wasn't super attached to anything, but it was nice to see it in live action, because it's similar-ish.
Yeah.
And it just went on. It went on and on and on, and it was the same sort of bleak, which is what you go in to these things for, I suppose. But
yeah. Very American approach, isn't it?
Compared
to the English approach. Although we do it now, but like in the past, like we've been very sort of like limited, haven't we? And I think it can be a bit better, really, in some ways.
I'd much prefer to watch something that's got like 3 episodes.
Yeah.
And tell a better story, or more stripped down.
Yeah.
Because to go back to Last of Us Part 2, I felt like that went on a bit too long.
Yeah.
But yeah. I mean, I'm not. I liked those games. I am replaying it actually. Funnily enough.
Yeah.
Because
the first one.
No, the sequel.
Yeah.
Because I'm kind of into collecting trophies.
Yeah.
It was COVID time.
Yeah.
It was like I'd study my drawing, and then there was nothing else to do, and then I sort of got into that sort of collecting.
Getting all the things. Yeah.
Which is dangerous. But I used to do it as a kid. Like before trophies, I'd always like to fully finish a game if I liked it.
Yeah. Yeah, it's good. It's good to do that, isn't it? It's like for me, it's got to be a real special game to get to that point. But
yeah. Oh yeah. I mean, and I did buy a couple of cheap ones once because I wasn't sure. I wanted to sort of see whether do I like getting a trophy, or do I like
the
games?
Yeah, and
you know, do I like that sense of achievement?
Yeah.
And it's definitely the sense of achievement that I like.
Really?
I'm not really into collecting trophies.
Yeah.
But if it's a game that I like, I do enjoy.
You will do it. Yeah. It's the same for me. It's got to be like a specific games like Skyrim's like that for me. I like doing everything on it.
Yeah.
And I've done everything on it probably like 2 or 3 times.
Yeah.
But it's just like, it's kind of just reliving it in a way. But it is fun to try and get it all. But some of them are just a ball ache, aren't they?
Oh yeah.
Too hard to get.
Yeah, but it's the challenge. I think it's not necessarily the sense of achievement. It's the challenge of it.
Yeah, I like it on. To be fair, I like it on Gran Turismo.
They're meant to be incredibly hard to do anything like that.
Some of them are crazy. Like but there's this really cool one that they do. Just recently, they do quite a lot of like interesting little ideas. But they've done this one recently where it's like a leaderboard based on everyone around the world, which is quite a common thing, I imagine, on racing games. But like, there's like you have to get into the top 5% for bronze, top 2% for silver, and top 1% for gold. And it is really like it really drives me to try and get. It's so hard to get that last percent.
Yeah.
But it's just like I'll spend like 3 hours trying to just nail this lap.
Yeah.
And you get right down to the detail of like, I know this corner I've got to like touch this curb in this way to get over it, and it's just like. But yeah, I do love that. To be fair, it's great fun.
I think it because people who don't play games might see it as a waste of time, but I think it gives you some stamina in a way.
It's like moderation, isn't it?
Yeah.
As long as you don't like, you can overdo it, can't you?
Yeah.
Like, I've overdone it in the past, and then you don't enjoy it as much.
Yeah.
But if you like sort of savoured them a little bit, and you go back on a game after a while, and it's like. You just feel like, oh yeah, this is really cool. It's a really good piece. I mean, it's just like they're just like works of art, aren't they?
Well, that's how I see them now. I mean, I think out of all the different types of media, I think games are kind of the most interesting.
Yeah.
Because they can the ones that tell stories can tell a story potentially better than any other thing because they put you in the place of the lead character a lot of the time or several lead characters, and you see you're emotionally invested more than watching something passively, and I find it very interesting, and I kind of wish games would do it a little bit more. I mean, I suppose again, to go to the Oddworld games, there's you have to save your kind. They're called Mudokons, and they're like this slave race.
Yeah.
And you've got to save them because they're about to get eaten.
Yeah.
They all work for this in Rupture Farms, which is a meat factory.
Yeah.
And they're all about to become meat pops because they've run out of every other type of meat.
Yeah.
So and doing that, you don't necessarily get as emotionally involved as something like The Last of Us, but it was still enough for me to care and to try and save them.
It drew you in.
And I think they've got a huge potential for empathy.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes it's sort of missed.
I think games are just like more flexible.
Yeah.
In a lot of ways, like they can be quite different. Like you said, The Walking Dead. It reminded me of the Walking Dead games, and I remember playing the first one of that, and like. It was really unique to me that I'd never played a game like that where it's basically not a game. It's kind of like
it's a storybook.
It is like a comic or a storybook.
Yeah.
reminded me actually. Aren't you working on some kind of comic thing at the moment?
Yeah. So it's obviously I don't want to share too much, and I can just ramble on about it. So I'll try and keep everything a little bit sort of trimmed down. But maybe 5 or 6 years ago, I became a little bit obsessed with the no-brow. Just pointing to him for people.
Behind you.
I've just realised this is audio. So there are a selection of themed books that have different artists collaborate on them, and so half the book is comic, and the other one's sort of like a showcase for illustrators. They're illustrator books. Yeah. And I thought it'd be nice to maybe do something of that myself. So I could, I came up with a couple of little stories, and I thought, well, I could also do some illustrations to go along with that and release sort of like a zine or a small sort of art book. So I came up with a few characters because I was forever drawing character doodles, I call them. They're not real people, they're just faces that sort of turn into characters. So I was forever drawing things like that, so I'd start adding stories to a few of them. And they're all incredibly very short. And then it just grew, and it grew, and it grew, and then I had like a handful of characters with all these different stories, and then I started seeing ties within these stories. And thinking, well, what if they interacted? What if it wasn't just like these little vignettes, which the no-brow things are? They're just like 2 pages typically. What if I did more of a serialized comic? And then that turned into a graphic novel. And now I've got this monster of a project ahead of me that I am chipping away at. And it sort of encompasses, all of my hopes and fears, really.
That's cool.
And it's an ensemble cast. There's not really a main character.
So it's a much bigger project than some other stuff.
It's sort of insane.
Got to have things like that though, because it keeps it's like a big thing to aim at, isn't it?
And I've started drafting out the first issue. But now I'm thinking maybe I'll just do the whole thing and release it as a graphic novel, or try and get a publisher involved. But it's so the actual, not to go into the story, but the world it's futuristic setting, but it's sort of Blade Runner, but set in the Peak District, the Lake Districts, those sort of areas, like hilly country.
It's so hilly around here, isn't it?
So it's Blade Runner, but it's sort of like covered in mold, and moss and things like that. And it's not necessarily cyberpunk, but there's a lot of inspiration from things like Blade Runner, things like The Matrix, things like Oddworld, things like Metal Gear Solid, Jurassic Park.
Pulling from all sorts of stuff.
All sorts of things. And loosely, humanity has decided to devote itself to VR systems.
Right, okay, that's cool.
And people don't want to work anymore, which is fair enough. And there's the promise of immortal life inside of a digital space. So your consciousness can eventually be downloaded and uploaded to the system.
You're living your new life that's better.
And humanity pretty much lives in this all the time anyway. And part of the deal of this immortal life is that your body will get replicated. You'll be cloned in order to become a workforce to keep your addiction and your new life
going.
Sustained. So there's these clones. So they're essentially a slave race, but it's a bit like, is it Plato's cave? So they only know their world. They don't know the world outside. And they're told, that they're not. It's not oppressive. It's through love that they're kept under. To do what they do, which is just the odd jobs.
Yeah.
And it's the mining for the resources, which don't really exist anymore.
That's an interesting concept. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's only. This is the thing. It's a huge thing, and that's only kind of part of it. There's also an outside. So this is like a gated community that this all lives in, and this is sort of like the cyberpunk inspired thing, although it doesn't look cyberpunk, but it's that idea of technology and humanity
integrated,
merging.
Yeah.
So there's like these. It's a city in a mountain.
Yeah.
And outside of that is just kind of like a wasteland again, like sort of in a Fallout sort of sense.
Yeah.
Now to create the clones involves pumping a lot of chemicals into the world, which is already starved, and creatures are now extinct or myth.
Yeah.
There's all these sort of growth enhancers to make the clones grow quick.
Wow.
There's all these suppressors to make them behave on top of all the propaganda that they're fed.
Yeah.
And this all gets fed into the food chain.
Yeah.
And there's people who live outside of the city who lived in this country before the big corporations came in.
What was happening before? Yeah.
Which was like an Eden.
Mm.
But then the corporations needed their fossil fuels and they pushed them out.
Yeah.
And all these chemicals are now in the food chain. People are now enabled to have children.
Wow. So have you got some of this like ready? Have you got some of it done? Like
it's so, like I said, the first two issues or chapters, depends what I end up doing with it.
Yeah.
They are written.
Mm.
Everything else is mostly written. It's not like the fine details, but I've got the full sort of synopsis. I've got the full plot lines. I know how it ends to a degree. Although I keep adding, I keep tweaking.
Could change a little bit.
Yeah.
But
basically, what I want to try and put across in it is, among other things, is the idea of identity. Because there's multiple different types of one body, let's say. So it becomes sort of like
which one is you?
Determinism and all this sort of stuff. But there's also lots of different factions. There's the people that live outside. There's the higher ups.
Yeah.
There's the dogs' bodies. Characters called Rudy and Goon, who are sort of like the hitmen for the boss.
Yeah.
Who isn't really the boss? He's got people above him. There's ideas of hierarchy in there. And
that's interesting. An interesting thought. Like, it's totally like wouldn't be accepted in our society today. But like being able to have exactly the same person twice and see what route they take.
Yeah,
it's kind of part of what you're saying, isn't it? Like,
well, I mean, the clones are picked. They're made in batches, and the ones that are slightly more sort of like quote unquote defective, end up getting the worst jobs, the menial jobs, the care jobs, which is what Charlie, one of the main characters, is. She's a sort of like a carer for the people who live in VR, because they don't wake up out of these things typically. So they're bath bathed and they're looked after in like they're ill. And they're told, the clones are told that these people are ill when they're not, but it makes them feel more obligated to look after them. And it's sort of an opiate for the masses, this thing, much like how social media is. It's so the people who are good, like the best of the batch, end up getting the better jobs, or the more responsible jobs. So it's
sounds quite unique. Like it reminds me, like you said, it pulls from a lot of different things. Doesn't it? Yeah.
Well, one of the reasons it's called scrambled eggs is from the variety of Easter eggs that there will be in there, because it's the idea of art art informing,
Yeah.
reality.
Yeah.
And, people like Elon Musk, I mean, I think he said something about, Jurassic Park, we could create Jurassic Park. It's like, why have you watched Jurassic Park? Why would you want to?
Yeah.
And then he's on about things like Skynet, and it's scary because he's obviously like, these people are inspired by the science fiction so much that they want to make it science fact, but they don't take the moral from the story.
That's kind of humanity, though, isn't it?
Oh yeah.
We're just like
doing
obsessed
it forever.
with like dreaming things up and then making them happen.
Yeah, exactly.
And, it's like, do you know much about ChatGPT?
Bits and bobs. I've heard about it. I mean, yeah.
I'm quite interested in that, and we've used it at work a little bit.
Right.
But so you can like give it some text, and if you've got a description for a product or whatever that's like a bit crap, it can really jazz it up for you.
Yeah.
And but just the way it's going, like what it'll end up being able to do, and it's quite scary when you think about it. And I've listened to like people who think it's great, people who think it's going to be really bad, and it's going to like, we're like opening up this thing that's going to like destroy humanity basically, and take away loads of jobs from a lot of people. But yes, it's a really interesting subject, and it is kind of scary. I go from thinking like that's really cool to thinking, bloody hell, like how's that going to affect us? But I mean, I've been seeing people using it online, using it on like YouTube videos, and they've been able to like, for example, with my job, like they've been able to use it to like create CAD files.
Yeah.
So and then, but the mad thing is, you can go back to it and say, I don't like that corner's a bit too sharp. And it'll change it, and it's just like, what? I don't understand.
Yeah, it worries me that things are too easy.
Yeah.
I don't think everything should be so easy. There's no satisfaction in that. And as useful as these things are as tools, as long as they're only used as tools.
Yeah.
But I think the fear is that they won't be. Like you say, they're going to take people's jobs. It's like AI art or AI music, or like these are useful tools in a sense. But you're removing that frustration, you're removing that sense of reward and that therapy that creativity can bring.
Yeah.
Now, and it's also, again, taking jobs, like storyboard jobs. Like, and, the corporations, it's cheaper for them to use AI art or AI systems to create the things on the fly.
They'll just do it, won't they?
Yeah.
But it also will create a market for people who really do want the human version.
Well, this is it. And I'm also interested to see what art will do with this.
Yeah.
That's sort of what interests me more. I mean, I don't really like the idea of AI art per se. I mean, I'm sure it is useful for people, and it can be useful in certain scenarios, I'm sure.
Yeah.
But I don't like the fact that, other artists' work is getting replicated.
Yeah.
Usually dead artists, they have no say. I think that's a bit wrong.
Yeah.
It's one thing taking sources from photos that are open source or whatever, but it's another thing. I mean, there's an artist that recently passed away, Kim Jong-gi. And I think within a day they'd uploaded a bunch of his work to a particular AI art system, and it's replicating things. It can do whatever it wants, and it just seems a bit wrong.
There's stuff going on all the time. I mean, it's a funny world. Like we make stuff. Like I can only speak from my own like experience of it, and like the speed at which like we'll design quite a few new products every year, because they're quite low volume products, but we design quite a lot of them. I think I probably almost design like 100 products a year or something, maybe. Some of them are really simple, some of them are quite complicated, and just the amount of them that get copied like within sometimes weeks. And it mostly comes from China, and I've got nothing against any of the people. It's just that the way they're country works basically.
Yeah.
But because they're basically just like pushed to be producing stuff.
Yeah.
But it's just sad that like we live in the world where like an original idea it just doesn't last.
No.
As an original idea, and it's quite sad sometimes, like when I've made something and then it gets copied immediately, and all of a sudden it's like you have people come to us and say, you have people come to us and go, they'll say, oh yeah, well you're just buying the Chinese one, and selling it. It's like,
that's incredibly frustrating. Anything like that,
and it's something you can overcome, but it's just like it is quite like annoying when you think about it. But like I try not to. I try and just think, is what it is. That's the world.
It is. I think that's the only way to stay sane.
Yeah,
to be honest,
you can't obsess over it, can you?
No.
Remember when I first found out that they were copying so much stuff, and I was like on all the websites, like looking, I was like, oh, they've copied that and they copied that, and I was like, I need to just stop, because that's the reality of it.
It is.
Yeah,
and it's just business. At the end
it
of
is
the
just
day.
business. Yeah, it is just business.
Unfortunately,
that's just the way it goes, isn't it? Yeah. So how do you feel about doing the YouTube like studies and stuff? Do you enjoy doing that, or do you find it a bit nerve-wracking?
I feel like I'd enjoy it more if so my setup isn't really that adequate. So I've got a laptop that's, touch wood, going to survive
a bit longer,
a while longer.
Yeah.
But it doesn't like doing anything with video particularly.
Yeah.
It gets very hot.
Yeah.
So it puts me off doing it, but I would like to do more.
Yeah.
And people, for the most part, the people who watch those things seem to enjoy them. I don't think they're very good, but I'm basing that on all these polished things
stuff,
that I've seen other people make, and the fact that I don't really see myself as a tutor, being mostly self-taught, not really knowing all the ins and outs of things. I don't want to create tutorials, but what I would like to do is help people and give people some guidance and be more like a coach, I suppose.
Rough guidance.
Yeah,
and you can like answer a specific question, but you'd rather make a video that's just like, here's what I've been doing.
Yeah, and I sort of I want to live stream more than anything, but the internet around here is appalling.
Is it? Right.
Yeah.
Thought it'd be quite good.
Yeah, no, apparently. So I lived in Sheffield up until recently, and we had pretty high speed internet.
Yeah.
So I sort of missed my chance to do the live streams, because that would have been perfect. It's actually paying more in order to do live streams that I never did.
Yeah.
And now I'm here, because it would take the pressure off the laptop.
Yeah.
And I feel like it'd sort of be more fun, and I could answer people's questions on the fly if they had any.
Yeah.
But the way that I draw and I approach drawing is to just do it and have a go and see what comes out.
Yeah.
And I think that fits live stream more than like a dedicated video on something. But I am going to do more, and now it's getting a bit brighter. And
I think you should. I think it's really cool. I was thinking, like, as you were saying it, like, there's just so many people out there.
Yeah.
There's so many people who like you don't think would enjoy what you do, but do. And like at the same time, like I watched one of yours earlier, and I thought I'll be honest, I went into it thinking like I'll watch a little bit of this just to get just to get some like pointers to talk to you later.
Yeah.
And I watched the whole thing.
Oh, bless you.
And I was like, oh, it's finished. I was like, oh, that was 14 minutes. It felt like 5.
Yeah.
And it was, because I couldn't wait for you to turn the page.
Right.
To show me the next thing.
Yeah.
I think that was the nice thing about it, is the fact that you were literally turning the page.
Yeah.
And and sometimes you were like, kept talking. I was like, oh, you can turn the page now. I want to see what the next thing is that you've done. But yeah, I like the sort of going through the sketchbook and like the process. Like,
out of all the things, that's the one thing that I like doing more, because I do some drawing videos as well.
Yeah.
But they're a little bit sort of like on the edge, because I don't rehearse anything. Yeah. Including what I'm saying, but also what I'm drawing. So
it's cool though, because that means you don't have to do any editing.
Well, that's because it's the limit of the laptop that means that I don't do any editing. So I have to do it in one take.
I think it's good. I think it's cool. I think people really react to that well nowadays.
Yeah.
And like
maybe
it's kind of like it's kind of like the reason that ASMR is like quite popular is because it's kind of like it's happening in the background a little bit.
Yeah.
And it's like having a conversation with someone, but you don't have to reply.
That's what I'm sort of... not that I really put much thought into it, but I thought if I make it conversational, I can do that even though I'm only talking to myself.
Stream of consciousness sort of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And to leave the mistakes, because again, it's that humanity. I don't necessarily like things that are overly polished, but that's what I feel like I'm not necessarily up against, but that's the competition, let's say. But yeah, I mean, to go back to Atomic Shrimp though, like that, his videos actually inspired me to do it in a sense, because I thought, well, there's not really much edit. I mean, there is edit. He edits his videos, but it's very off the cuff and it's very relaxed.
Yeah, he inspired me as well, massively.
Right,
yeah. Like it just how did he inspire me? Like, it just seems so genuine.
Yeah,
yeah,
and it is that conversational. I mean, it's almost like the uncle I never had.
Yeah.
Or, he reminds me a bit of my dad in sense. So it's also quite warm and cozy in that way.
Yeah. It's nice. Yeah. I think it's really cool, and that's the nice thing about people being able to make their own media in their house. Like it's you get this really you can latch onto someone who's really unique and really just ticks the boxes for you for some reason. Like there's a guy I watch who plays he does Let's Plays and things like that.
Yes, yeah.
He's played Stardew Valley, he's played Fallout and all that sort of stuff. And he's not a typical like Let's Play a live streamer.
Yeah.
He doesn't like go, right, here we are guys, like let's do this, cut to the next thing. All right, we've run through this level and we've done this. It's like you're not appreciating the game. Like this guy like fully gets into it and role plays it.
Yeah.
And almost to the point where it's too much, but I love it. And he's from Yorkshire, and he's just like he's from where's he from? I think he might be from Leeds, maybe.
Right. Okay.
And he used to be like a police officer, I think. And but yeah, he talks about his life a lot, and like I find that, and also his people who follow him, he's not got loads of followers, but they're more interested in like him, than they almost in the game.
I think that's almost the mistake that some people new coming into it think. It's like it's they have to become a brand, but when really it's the personality, like you say.
I just need to show.
It's like a friend, or like
talk and just be conversational. Yeah, it's cool. A bit like this, really, like informal, like and there'll be bits where I knock the microphone and crap like that. It doesn't work quite properly, but it's good fun, isn't it? I like it.
Yeah, I mean, it's nice, and I think it's a shame that sort of YouTube and certain things are getting more polished, or it seems to be that that's the things that are being promoted. Because I remember when YouTube first came out, it was full of do-it-yourself kind of people. It was genuine people instead of not celebrity in the old sense, but like these YouTube
got big channels,
these brands.
But
I think it will go the other way.
I think it's already starting to, because I've noticed sometimes like YouTube will just pop up a video to me that's got like 30 views. Yeah. And I'll be like, I'll click on that. Like, what is that? And then sometimes it's really interesting. And it's just like, wow, why haven't more people seen this? Yeah. And I don't know if that's YouTube going, this is a good bit of content, or if it's just like throwing some random stuff into the mix.
Which it should.
It should.
I definitely.
Yeah. Yeah, it's good. What's the meaning of life to you, Alex?
So the hippie child in me would say love.
Yeah.
I think most people could agree. Things like family and friends and your fellow man and the love of nature and all of that sort of thing. But for me, on a more personal level, I'd kind of feel like these big questions aren't really meant to be answered. We're not really meant to know everything. Yeah. I think there's a lot of fun in not knowing things.
Mystery of it,
Yeah. So, and just because if you know something, it makes it less miraculous.
Yeah.
I think you've got to, there's got to be some wonder there, and there's a lot of wonder in not knowing.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
But yeah, I think if we all just could get along a bit better, especially with current wars and all of this sort of thing. Yeah. I think and it would be easy enough to do in some ways. I don't know. Yeah. I'm not a politician. I'm just a dreamer.
But it's like priorities, isn't it, and things like that. Yeah. Getting caught up in it. Yeah.
But yeah,
No, I like that. It's cool.
Yeah.
Everyone gives a different answer. I love it. I really like asking that question because it in some ways they give the same answer but in their own way.
Yeah,
And,
yeah, definitely.
It's cool.
Oh,
We're at the end anyway, so it's fine. Someone's just posted something through the letterbox. Thanks so much for doing that, Alex.
No, it's been really.
I've really
nice.
enjoyed that.
I've enjoyed it.
Yeah, I hope so. I think most people do enjoy it, and I think some people feel like I did one with a lady who was she's probably like maybe 50 in her 50s and does like crafts and things, and she was I
was listening to that today. Actually.
She was so nervous about it. I think to start with, but like. She really opened up as we went on, and she's messaged me a couple of times like I really enjoyed doing that, and like she's put me on to some other people as well.
Oh, great!
One lady who's Ukrainian actually, so I would love to go and talk to her.
The lady that she was talking about.
Yeah,
yeah.
Yeah, it was interesting that, wasn't it?
Yeah.
So
that'd be good.
Yeah. Thank you.
No, it's my pleasure. I've really enjoyed it.
Good fun. Hi again, thanks for listening to that episode, and a big thanks to Alex for joining me and talking about what he does. I really found it interesting actually, and we had quite a lot of commonality. That's one thing I'm realising doing this podcast really, that you can find common ground with anyone really, and it's nice to try and find that and work hard to find that. So, but yeah, be sure to go and have a look at his links in the description of this episode. And see what you can do. It's really amazing stuff, and I think it adds a lot to this episode if you can see his work. But yeah, look forward to seeing you again in the next one. Thanks for listening.